The scent of pine and damp earth, the familiar perfume of the Silverwood Pack territory, did little to soothe Isabella's trembling hands. She smoothed down the ceremonial silver gown, the fabric cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the nervous heat pooling in her stomach. Today was her wedding day, not a day born of love or even affection, but a day forged in the cold fires of political necessity. A peace treaty, a joining of two powerful packs, the Silverwoods and the formidable Nightclaw pack, sealed not with ink and promises, but with her life. Isabella, daughter of the Silverwood Alpha, was the price, the offering, the lamb sent to appease the legendary, fearsome Alpha Nathan of the Nightclaws. Whispers followed him like shadows, tales of his ruthless strength, his unyielding dominance, his temper as volatile as a winter storm. He had only agreed to the alliance, brokered by the weary elders of both packs, after decades of bloody skirmishes over territory and resources, under the condition that Isabella become his Luna, his mate, his property, as some cynics might say. She had never truly met him. Only glimpses across neutral territories during tense council meetings. The weight of his stare like a physical force, even from a distance. He was large, powerfully built, with eyes the color of chipped ice and hair as black as a moonless night. He radiated an aura of absolute authority, a predatory stillness that promised swift, brutal action. And every rumor, every hushed conversation she'd overheard, confirmed one chilling fact: Alpha Nathan hated this arrangement. He hated the necessity of it, and by extension, he hated her. She stood in her familiar chambers at the heart of the Silverwood domain, where intricately woven tapestries depicted harmonious nature scenes. A far cry from the harsh hunting images she'd heard described in Nightclaw territory. The silver gown, woven from moon silk threads in Silverwood tradition, shimmered in the soft light, embroidered with the sigil of a silver wolf howling beneath ancient trees, her pack's emblem. It was beautiful, yet it felt as heavy as a shroud. She thought of her brother, who had once teased her about falling for some Silverwood warrior, of her gentle mother who had taught her compassion and the ways of herbal healing. Now, those skills felt useless against the harsh future awaiting her. Her father, Alpha Marcus, entered her chambers, his face etched with a fatigue and conflict Isabella knew mirrored her own. He was a good alpha, devoted to his pack, but the generations of conflict with the Nightclaws had taken their toll. This marriage, this sacrifice of his only daughter, was a desperate gamble for lasting peace, a peace he hoped would prevent further losses, like the death of his own younger brother in a border raid years ago. "Isabella," he said, his voice thick with unspoken apologies. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the touch heavy with responsibility. "The time has come. Are you ready?" Ready. How could one be ready to chain oneself to a man who despised her very existence? How could she be ready to leave behind the towering pines, the rushing rivers, the faces she had known and loved her entire life, for the harsh, mountainous territory of the Nightclaws and a future defined by resentment? She recalled tales of Nightclaw brutality and war, their ruthless tactics, their lack of mercy for the weak, a stark contrast to Silverwood's philosophy of protection and community. But Isabella was an alpha's daughter. Duty was woven into the fabric of her being, as intrinsic as the wolf that slumbered beneath her skin. She had been raised with tales of sacrifice, of putting the pack's needs above personal desire. This was her duty, her sacrifice. She lifted her chin, forcing a semblance of calm she didn't feel. "Yes, Father, I am ready." She wouldn't shame her pack, her family, with tears or fear. She would meet her fate with the quiet dignity they had instilled in her. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Nathan, he is complex. Isabella, powerful, but scarred, not just on his skin, but in his soul, by the wars, by loss. His voice lowered. He lost both his parents and his younger sister in the Great Border War 2 decades ago. It forged him into cold steel, but it also left deep wounds. Do not mistake his harshness for insurmountable hatred. Find the strength within you, the strength I know you possess, her strength. It felt like a fragile reed against the hurricane she was about to face. Her strength wasn't in overt displays of dominance or physical prowess. It lay in her quiet resilience, her empathy, her ability to observe and understand, her unwavering loyalty. Qualities she suspected an alpha like Nathan would dismiss as weakness. The journey to the neutral ground where the ceremony would take place was a blur of suffocating formality. She rode in a closed carriage, the silverwood sigil emblazoned on the side, a stark symbol of her origins. When they arrived, the air crackled with palpable tension. The clearing was divided. Silverwood wolves on one side, nightclaws on the other. The nightclaws were larger, rougher looking, their energy more primal, more overtly aggressive. They wore dark leathers and light armor, many carrying weapons openly, even at a peace ceremony. They watched her carriage with undisguised curiosity, and in many eyes, open hostility. The contrast between the two packs couldn't be clearer. Silverwood's deep forest elegance versus Nightclaw's mountain austerity. And then, he was there. Alpha Nathan stood near the ancient oath stone, a massive, weathered granite boulder said to have witnessed countless vows over generations, its surface covered in archaic symbols. Flanking him were his beta, a stern-faced wolf named Elias, and the sharp-eyed female warrior, Gamelina. He wore formal black leather, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders, the power coiled in his stance. He didn't look towards her carriage. His gaze was fixed straight ahead, his jaw tight, his entire being radiating impatience and displeasure. When she finally stepped out, aided by her father, a hush fell over the clearing. All eyes were on her. She felt stripped bare, analyzed, judged. She forced herself to walk forward, her steps measured, her back straight, ignoring the burn of hundreds of stares. She could feel the assessment from the Nightclaws. They were measuring her, not as a future Luna, but as a potential weak link in this alliance. As she approached the oath stone, Nathan finally turned his head. His icy blue eyes met hers, and the force of his gaze was like a physical blow. There was no warmth, no curiosity, not even polite indifference. There was only cold, hard resentment, sharp and undisguised. He looked at her as if she were not a bride, not even a person, but an inconvenient obligation, a burden he was forced to bear. The elder conducting the ceremony began the ancient rites, his voice droning on about unity, strength, and the sacred bond of mates. Isabella barely heard the words. Her entire focus was narrowed to the alpha beside her, the sheer, overwhelming force of his presence, the tangible waves of animosity rolling off him. When it came time for the vows, the elder prompted Nathan. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a low growl, rough and clipped. I, Nathan, Alpha of the Nightclaw Pack, take you, Isabella of Silverwood, as my Luna, as my mate, bound by treaty, sealed by oath. The words were correct, but devoid of any emotion save reluctance. Then it was her turn. Her voice trembled slightly, but she held his gaze. I, Isabella, of the Silverwood Pack, take you, Nathan, Alpha of the Nightclaw Pack, as my alpha, as my mate, bound by treaty, sealed by oath. As the final words left her lips, Something shifted in the air. A spark, faint but undeniable, arced between them. It wasn't warmth, not yet, but a sudden, startling awareness. Her inner wolf stirred, recognizing something primal, something fundamental in him, the mate bond. It snapped into place with the finality of a closing lock, an invisible tether linking their souls, regardless of their feelings. She saw a flicker of surprise, quickly masked, in Nathan's eyes. He felt it too, the involuntary jolt, the unwelcome pull, a sudden awareness of her presence on a deeper, uncomfortable level. His jaw tightened further, his resentment seemingly deepening at this forced intimacy imposed by fate itself. The ceremony concluded. There was polite, strained applause. Nathan turned abruptly, offering her his arm with the bare minimum of courtesy required. His touch was like ice, even through the fabric of her sleeve. Luna Isabella, he stated, the title sounding foreign and mocking on his tongue. Welcome to the Nightclaw Pack. His tone made it clear it was anything but a welcome. It was a sentence. As he led her towards the Nightclaw side, away from her family, away from everything she knew. Isabella took a deep breath. The pine scent was fading, replaced by the sharper, wilder scent of the mountains, of Nathan's territory, of his pack, of him. This was her new life, a life bound to an alpha who hated her, tethered by a bond neither of them wanted. Her father's words echoed, "Find the strength within you," she would have to. It was the only way she would survive. The journey into the heart of Nightclaw territory was swift and suffocatingly silent. Nathan set a punishing pace, his long strides eating up the rugged terrain. Isabella, despite her own shifter endurance, found herself having to push to keep up, the heavy ceremonial gown hindering her movements. The terrain changed dramatically. The lush, verdant forests of Silverwood gave way to steep, rocky slopes, sparse vegetation clinging to stone, and a constant, biting wind that carried the chill of high altitudes even in the afternoon sun. He offered no assistance, nor did he slow down. His beta, Elias, walked slightly behind and to the side, his expression unreadable, while Gamma Lena flanked Isabella, her sharp eyes missing nothing, her posture radiating suspicion. The rest of the Nightclaw contingent followed, their presence a heavy weight at her back. There were no words exchanged. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on rocky ground, the whisper of the wind through sparse, hardy pines clinging to the mountainsides, and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Isabella tried to suppress a shiver, caused not just by the cold, but by the palpable hostility emanating from her escorts and the stark, unforgiving nature of the land itself. It felt harsher, more primal than the embracing forests of Silverwood. Jagged peaks loomed, casting long, cold shadows. It was the land that bred strength through adversity, mirroring the alpha who ruled it. As they crested a final ridge, the Nightclaw settlement sprawled below them. It wasn't a village of quaint cottages like Silverwood, but a formidable stronghold built directly into the mountainside. Stone and heavy timber formed imposing structures, interconnected by fortified walkways and bridges spanning deep ravines. Watchtowers dotted the perimeter, manned by alert sentries whose gazes followed their approach. Its architecture spoke volumes about the Nightclaw culture, defensibility over comfort, preparedness for conflict, a pack that trusted thick walls and high positions more than diplomacy. Their arrival was met not with celebration, but with cold, wary silence. Pack members emerged from dwellings and training grounds, their faces hard, their eyes assessing Isabella with open skepticism. Children peered from behind their parents' legs, their usual curiosity replaced by caution taught by elders. The air hummed with distrust, She was the outsider, the symbol of a forced peace many resented, the mate their powerful alpha clearly did not desire. Whispers followed her passage, too low to hear clearly, but the tone was unmistakable: suspicion, resentment, perhaps even pity, which stung worst of all. She saw the judgment in their eyes, the comparison to their own hardy, battle-scarred females. Nathan led her directly to the Alpha's lodge, the largest and most central building, perched high with a commanding view of the entire settlement. It was built of dark, heavy stone and ancient wood, impressive but stark, almost brutalist in its design. Inside, the main hall was vast and dimly lit, dominated by a massive stone hearth where a low fire burned, doing little to dispel the chill or the gloom. Furs were thrown over heavy wooden furniture, and weapon racks lined the walls, displaying axes, swords, and spears, trophies and tools in equal measure. It felt less like a home and more like a war room preparing for the next campaign. Without a word, Nathan gestured towards a heavy wooden door off the main hall. "Your chambers," he stated flatly. He didn't escort her, didn't offer any further explanation. He turned his back, already addressing Elias about some pack matter, supply levels or patrol readiness, dismissing her presence as completely as if she'd vanished into thin air. Gamelina stepped forward, her expression unchanged. Though Isabella thought she detected a flicker of something, perhaps professional obligation warring with personal disapproval. "I will show you, Luna." The title still sounded stiff, forced, an ill-fitting garment. Isabella followed Lena into the indicated room. It was large, larger than her chambers back home, and furnished with heavy, dark wood pieces carved with motifs of mountain predators and harsh landscapes. A thick fur rug covered the stone floor, and tapestries depicting fierce hunts and historical nightclaw battles adorned the walls. A tall, narrow window offered a stunning, albeit stark, view of the surrounding peaks piercing a gray sky. It was functional, even luxurious in a rugged way, but utterly devoid of personal touches or warmth. Cold, impersonal, like her welcome, like her husband. "Your belongings have arrived from Silverwood," Lena said, gesturing to several sturdy chests placed against one wall. "Meals are served communally in the main hall, though the Alpha often takes his here." She paused, then added, her voice carefully neutral. "Your duties as Luna are yet to be defined. The Alpha will inform you." It sounded less like information and more like a subtle warning. "Don't assume anything." "Thank you, Gamelina," Isabella replied, keeping her voice steady, refusing to show the dismay she felt. Lena gave a curt nod, her sharp eyes lingering on Isabella for a moment, assessing her composure, perhaps looking for signs of the weakness she expected. "If you require anything practical, linens, water, firewood, inform the household staff, or me." With that, she turned and left, closing the heavy door behind her with a quiet thud that echoed in the sudden silence. Alone, at last. Isabella sank onto the edge of the large, fur-covered bed. The strength she had clung to throughout the ordeal began to waver. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and unwelcome. She was truly alone, adrift in a sea of hostility, bound to a man whose coldness felt like a physical barrier. The mate bond hummed beneath her skin, a confusing counterpoint to his rejection, a low thrum of awareness, a strange sense of his presence even when he wasn't near, a faint echo of the power and anger simmering within him. It felt like an alien frequency tuned into her soul, unwelcome yet undeniable, linking her to his volatile emotions without her consent. She pushed the tears back fiercely. Crying wouldn't help. Self-pity was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her father's words returned. Find the strength. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the harsh beauty of the Nightclaw Mountains. This was her reality now. She wouldn't crumble. She wouldn't give Nathan, or his suspicious pack, the satisfaction of seeing her break. Unpacking her chests became a small act of defiance, of reclaiming a tiny piece of this cold space for herself. She carefully laid out familiar items, a few leather-bound books of Silverwood lore and poetry, a small, intricately carved wooden bird her brother had made years ago, a soft woolen shawl knitted by her mother in the warm earth tones of their home forest, small anchors in a turbulent sea. She even placed a small pot containing a resilient silverwood seedling on the windowsill, a silent promise of life in this barren place. That evening, she braced herself and went to the main hall for the communal meal. The moment she entered, conversation dwindled to hushed murmurs. All eyes turned to her. Nathan sat at the head of the high table, flanked by Elias and Lena, deep in conversation. He didn't acknowledge her entrance. No one offered her a seat or a greeting. She stood uncertainly for a moment near the entrance, feeling the weight of their collective gaze, the unspoken challenge, the heavy air of disapproval. Taking a deep breath, she walked with measured steps towards the high table. There was an empty seat beside Lena, opposite Elias. With quiet resolve, she took it. Lena stiffened almost imperceptibly but said nothing. Elias offered a curt, barely perceptible nod, his gaze flicking towards Nathan before returning to his plate. Nathan continued his conversation with Elias as if she weren't there, though Isabella felt the heightened tension in his shoulders, the fractional tightening of his jaw. He was aware of her, acutely aware, but deliberately, pointedly ignoring her. The meal was a trial. The food was hearty, roasted meat that tasted strongly of game, tough root vegetables, dark, dense bread, but it tasted like ash in her mouth. The silence around her at the high table was thick, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery on wooden plates and the low murmur of Nathan's conversation with his beta. Occasionally, she caught snippets, border patrols encountering difficulties, rogue wolf sightings increasing. Resource management disputes, pack business, Luna business, traditionally, yet she was utterly excluded, invisible. She ate what she could, maintaining a facade of composure, observing the pack members at the other tables. Their deference to Nathan was absolute, bordering on fear. Yet, there was also fierce loyalty in the way they hung on his words when he occasionally addressed the hall. They were a pack forged in hardship, bound by survival and the undeniable strength of their alpha. And she was the unwelcome intruder, the symbol of a truce many of them likely resented, a fragile piece from a different world. As the meal ended, Nathan finally looked directly at her, his expression hard. His icy eyes held no warmth, only command. Do not interfere in pack matters, Isabella. The words cut through the relative quiet of the hall, ensuring everyone heard. You are Luna by title, granted by treaty, not by pack choice or my desire. Know your place. Stay out of the way. The words were a public declaration of her insignificance, a deliberate humiliation designed to put her firmly in a powerless position. A wave of heat washed over her face, but she met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to show the hurt stinging inside. I understand my position. Alpha Nathan, she replied, her voice quiet but clear, carrying across the table. I am here because of the treaty that protects both our packs. I will honor my commitment, just as I expect the alpha of the Nightclaw pack to honor his. A flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by irritation, crossed his face. Perhaps he had expected tears or abject submission. Her quiet defiance seemed to nettle him. Elias shifted uncomfortably beside him, looking down at the table. Lena watched the exchange with sharp, intelligent eyes, a thoughtful expression momentarily softening her harsh features. Nathan pushed back his chair abruptly, the harsh sound scraping against the stone floor. "See that you do." He strode from the hall without a backward glance, his pack parting before him like water before a ship's prow. Isabella remained seated for a moment, the eyes of the remaining pack members burning into her. She had survived the first day. She had faced his public dismissal and hadn't broken. It was a small victory, perhaps, but in this frozen landscape, she would cling to every scrap of warmth, every tiny assertion of her own resilience. The mate bond pulsed, a strange mix of his residual anger and a faint, unwilling spark of something else: intrigue, annoyance at her refusal to cower. Whatever it was buried deep beneath layers of ice. Her challenge now was not just to survive, but somehow, someday, to thaw the frozen heart of the alpha who hated her. The days bled into weeks, each one a careful navigation of the Nightclaw stronghold's complex social and political currents. Isabella maintained her quiet dignity, establishing a routine that kept her occupied without overstepping the invisible, yet firmly drawn boundaries Nathan had imposed. She spent significant time in the small, dusty library the lodge possessed, surprisingly well stocked with histories, battle logs, and lineage scrolls. Though clearly neglected, she immersed herself, seeking not just distraction, but understanding, learning the names of past Nightclaw alphas, tracing the origins of their feuds, deciphering their harsh laws, and trying to comprehend the relentless cycle of conflict and survival that had shaped them. This knowledge, she hoped, might offer a key to navigating her present reality. She also cautiously explored the settlement within the areas implicitly permitted for her, the central common areas, the path to the healer's den, the small, wind-swept terrace where herbs might possibly grow. She offered polite greetings that were often met with curt nods, averted gazes, or sometimes outright silence. Specific incidents reinforced her isolation. A basket of medicinal herbs she gathered was accidentally trampled. A question asked of a passing warrior was met with a sneer about Silverwood's softness not belonging here. The hostility wasn't always overt, but it was a constant, chilling undercurrent. She learned the names and faces of key pack members, observing the intricate hierarchy from the periphery. Elias, the beta, remained Nathan's shadow, loyal, efficient, and perpetually observant. Isabella sometimes caught a glimpse of profound weariness in his eyes when Nathan wasn't looking, the strain of serving a difficult, demanding alpha evident. He remained formally correct towards her, never unkind, but never offering overt friendship either. Gamelina, head of the warriors, was sharp, demanding, and fiercely protective of her pack and her alpha above all else. She watched Isabella with unwavering scrutiny, her initial suspicions slowly, almost imperceptibly, morphing into a kind of cautious neutrality as Isabella consistently demonstrated composure, avoided pack politics, and showed no signs of challenging Nathan's authority or complaining about her treatment. Lena respected strength, and Isabella's quiet resilience was, perhaps, a form of strength Lena hadn't initially recognized. Nathan remained a distant, formidable presence. He rarely spoke to her directly, communicating necessary information, logistical details about the lodge, times for formal appearances, through Elias or Lena, or with brief, impersonal commands if they happened to be in the same room. Yet, the mate bond was a constant, unwanted companion. It hummed between them, an invisible thread that tightened with an almost physical pull whenever they were in proximity. She felt the ebb and flow of his moods with startling clarity, the simmering anger that seemed his default state, the sharp focus during intense council meetings, the rare, quickly masked moments of deep weariness late at night. Sometimes, when the stronghold was quiet and she lay awake in her cold room, she felt a bizarre, primal yearning towards him, a pull originating from her wolf that horrified and confused her. Her wolf recognized his, saw the power and potential protector in him, even if the man himself rejected the woman entirely. She knew, with absolute certainty, that he felt it too. She saw it in the way his eyes would occasionally snag on hers across the crowded hall before quickly, almost violently, looking away. She saw it in the way his knuckles would whiten on the arm of his chair when she inadvertently brushed past him in a narrow corridor. She felt it in the stiff set of his shoulders when she entered a room, a tension that went beyond mere dislike. He fought the bond with the same ferocity he seemed to apply to everything else in his life. His rejection was a constant, stinging reminder of her unwanted status, made worse by the traitorous connection humming beneath her own skin. The pack's overt hostility hadn't lessened significantly, merely settled into a wary, watchful tolerance in some quarters, while remaining openly resentful in others. They saw her deference to Nathan, her quiet ways, and many interpreted it exactly as Nathan likely intended: weakness. A Luna unfit for their powerful alpha, a political pawn foisted upon them, a constant reminder of a peace they hadn't chosen. Whispers continued to follow her like shadows, speculating on her purpose, her loyalties, her perceived fragility, Silverwood's softness. She heard one younger warrior mutter to another as she passed the training grounds, "Pretty, maybe, but she won't last a Nightclaw winter. She doesn't have the fire." Yet, Isabella wasn't idle, nor was she merely absorbing the negativity. Her gentle nature hid a keen mind and extraordinarily observant eyes. She noticed things others missed: the subtle tensions between certain pack factions, particularly between the older traditionalists and Nathan's more pragmatic command structure. The low grumbling among some of the elder members who felt the treaty with Silverwood was a betrayal of their ancestors lost in the wars, and most troublingly, the way a particular group of younger, ambitious warriors, led by a charismatic but clearly resentful wolf named Kyle, seemed to operate with slightly too much independence. Their loyalty was pledged loudly and often to Nathan, yet their actions sometimes hinted at a different, darker agenda. Kale was everything Nathan wasn't: charming on the surface, quick with a seemingly warm smile, always ready with a flattering word, but his eyes held a calculating, restless edge. He often sought Isabella out, usually under the guise of offering helpful advice or snippets of pack gossip, his tone bordering on conspiratorial. As if they were fellow outsiders. "The alpha drives the pack hard, Luna," he might say sympathetically, "sometimes too hard. Some traditions are being forgotten in his quest for efficiency." Isabella maintained a polite but firm distance, sensing something deeply disingenuous beneath his smooth facade. His deference to Nathan felt performative, his ambition poorly concealed by the veneer of concern. He seemed to relish sowing seeds of doubt. One afternoon, while seeking a specific historical text on Nightclaw Silverwood border treaties in the library, a task she'd undertaken to better understand the roots of the conflict, Isabella overheard hushed voices from the adjoining council chamber. The heavy oak door had been left slightly ajar. It was Kale, speaking with two other senior, respected pack members known for their staunch traditionalist views and quiet resentment of the peace treaty. Gavril, an elder with cold eyes and a past shrouded in pack history, and Rorik, a grizzled former warrior, cannot abide this peace forged in weakness. Kyle was saying, his voice low and urgent, betraying the charm he usually employed. Nathan binds himself to her, a silverwood runt, diluting our bloodline and our focus. While our borders are stretched thin, our resources strained by this unnatural alliance, he forgets the old ways, the strength that made the Nightclaws feared, not appeased. The Alpha commands loyalty, Kale. Gavril grunted, his voice raspy with age, though his tone lacked true conviction, hinting at shared sentiment. His word is law, loyalty to the pack, to our strength, Kale countered, his voice rising slightly before being checked. Nathan's focus is divided, compromised. This treaty, this mate, they soften him. They make him look towards Silverwood when he should be consolidating Gore power. We need an alpha who remembers what it means to be Nightclaw, an alpha who puts our dominance first, who isn't afraid to take what is ours, alliance or no alliance. Careful, Kale, Rorik warned, his voice a low rumble. That sounds like treasonous talk. It's realistic talk. Kale hissed back. Change is needed. Leadership that isn't shackled by a treaty forced upon us. Leadership that remembers our ancestors' blood spilled fighting them. Think on it. Many feel the same way. They just lack the courage to speak it. Isabella froze behind a tall bookshelf, her blood running cold. This wasn't just idle grumbling or barracks discontent. This was sedition, actively being planned and spread by an ambitious warrior courting disillusioned elders. Kale was actively sowing dissent, preying on existing frustrations about the treaty and Nathan's perceived compromises. She slipped away silently, her heart pounding against her ribs, the dusty smell of old parchment suddenly suffocating. What should she do? Nathan had explicitly, publicly warned her not to interfere in pack matters. He wouldn't believe her. He'd likely accuse her of trying to stir up trouble, of carrying tales to gain favor or sow discord between him and his men, perhaps even suspecting Silverwood manipulation. Revealing what she heard could easily backfire spectacularly, painting her as a meddling outsider, further isolating her, and potentially endangering her position. Yet, the thought of staying silent felt like a profound betrayal, not just of Nathan, who, despite his coldness, was her alpha by law and bond, but of the pack itself, the innocent members who would inevitably suffer if Kale's ambitions led to open conflict or a disastrous breaking of the treaty. Her loyalty, ingrained since birth, warred intensely with her precarious position and Nathan's clear decree. She chose caution. For now, she would watch Kale, Gavril, and Rorik more closely than ever. She would listen more intently to the undercurrents within the pack, using the invisibility her current status afforded her. Her quietness, her perceived weakness, could perhaps be her shield, allowing her to observe without attracting undue attention from the conspirators. Her interactions with Nathan remained strained, limited mostly to the tense communal meals and occasional, unavoidable crossings in the lodge corridors. But something subtle began to shift during one particularly tense council meeting. The topic was the recent increase in rogue wolf activity near the Silverwood border, an extremely sensitive subject given the treaty and the lingering bad blood. Warriors reported skirmishes, losses of livestock on border farms, and unusually bold incursions. Nathan listened, his face grim, planning aggressive retaliatory patrols. "Forgive me, Alpha." Isabella spoke up softly, breaking her usual silence in council. All heads snapped towards her. Nathan's gaze was sharp, instantly wary, a silent warning in his eyes. Kale, also present, shot her a look of pure venom, before quickly schooling his features into polite, feigned interest. But the patterns you describe, they don't sound like typical rogue behavior. Rogues are usually desperate, disorganized, hitting easy targets. Nathan stared at her, his expression unreadable but radiating impatience. Get to the point, Luna. These attacks. Isabella continued calmly, drawing on her knowledge of her home territory and its typical threats, trying to keep her voice steady under his icy gaze. Seem coordinated, targeted specifically at resources near the border demarcation lines, storehouses, shepherd huts, almost as if designed to provoke friction between our packs, to test the treaty's boundaries. There was a heavy silence. Elias frowned thoughtfully, looking at the map laid out on the table. Lena leaned forward slightly, her sharp eyes considering Isabella's words. Explain further, Nathan commanded, his voice dangerously low, though perhaps a fraction less dismissive than before. In Silverwood, Isabella elaborated, choosing her words carefully. Rogue packs usually hit isolated farms far from patrol routes, taking what they can quickly. They avoid direct confrontation if possible, especially with organized pack patrols. These attacks sound bolder, more strategic, as if the intent isn't just survival, but destabilization. Perhaps someone wants border incidents right now. Another heavy silence descended. Lena spoke first. She has a point. Alpha. The raids are unusually precise. They hit guarded locations and vanished too quickly. Nathan considered her words, his icy eyes boring into her for a long moment. He didn't thank her, didn't acknowledge the validity of her point directly. But Isabella saw him subtly shift the focus of the planned patrols on the map, instructing Elias to have scouts look for signs of coordinated movement, tracking skills beyond typical rogue capabilities, rather than simple scavenging patterns. He didn't speak to her afterwards as the council dispersed, but as he swept past her out of the chamber, his gaze lingered on her for a fraction longer than usual. The mate bond pulsed with a confusing mix of his usual irritation and something else, a flicker of grudging respect, or perhaps just surprise that the Silverwood runt had offered a potentially valuable strategic insight. It was the smallest of cracks in the wall of ice between them, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Isabella felt a sliver of hope, quickly tempered by the memory of Kael's venomous glare and the hushed, treasonous whispers she had overheard. The shadows in the Nightclaw pack ran deeper and were more tangled than she had initially realized, and she was standing right in the middle of them. Her position was more dangerous than ever, but perhaps, just perhaps, she was starting to find her own way to navigate it, using the very weaknesses Nathan despised. Life continued under the heavy shadow of unspoken tensions and watchful eyes. Isabella persisted in her quiet observations, meticulously noting the subtle alliances and simmering resentments within the pack. Kael and his faction grew bolder, their dissatisfaction with Nathan's leadership becoming a more open secret. Though always carefully veiled in loud pronouncements of loyalty whenever the Alpha was near, they cleverly exploited every perceived weakness, every hardship the pack faced, a harsh early snowfall that damaged winter supplies, a minor border dispute with a smaller neighboring pack over hunting grounds, the continued strain of integrating treaty obligations with Nightclaw traditions to subtly fuel discontent. Kael positioned himself as the voice of the true Nightclaw, subtly contrasting his supposed traditionalism with Nathan's perceived compromises. Isabella noticed Nathan seemed more burdened than usual. The lines of stress around his eyes deepened, and his already formidable temper seemed closer to the surface. Though always tightly controlled, he pushed himself and his warriors relentlessly, personally leading patrols to the troubled borders, meticulously overseeing resource allocation, dealing with the constant undercurrent of unease within the pack council. He was an alpha, carrying the immense weight of his pack, the pressure of upholding a treaty he despised, and, Isabella suspected with growing certainty, the confusing, strengthening pull of a mate bond he refused to acknowledge even to himself. One evening, a ferocious blizzard hit the high mountains with unexpected ferocity. Whiteout conditions descended rapidly, visibility dropping to near zero, trapping several patrol groups, including one led by Gamma Lena, out in the unforgiving terrain far from the stronghold. Panic began to ripple through the settlement as hours passed with no word. Radio communication rendered useless by the atmospheric disturbance. Nathan stood like granite before the massive map in the council chamber, his jaw tight, coordinating search efforts through strained runners and signal fires that were barely visible. Elias, his face grim, relayed fragmented reports, while reserve warriors prepared rescue teams, bundling furs and supplies, their faces taut with anxiety. Isabella watched from the doorway of the bustling chamber, her heart aching for the missing wolves and their families, huddled anxiously in the main hall, their fear a palpable presence. She knew the dangers of these mountains, the swiftness with which the weather could turn lethal from her studies in the library and cautious conversations with the elderly head healer, Alara. She also knew Silverwood tracking techniques, honed in dense forests, but emphasizing subtle signs, disturbances in snowdrifts, faint animal trails leading to shelter that might be overlooked in open, blizzard-swept terrain. Specifically, she recalled lessons about how animals, and sometimes lost travelers, sought refuge near geothermal vents common in some mountainous regions. Hesitantly, she entered the chamber and approached the map table. Nathan didn't look up, his focus absolute as he drew potential search grids. Alpha, she began softly, not wanting to startle him, but needing to speak. He finally glanced at her, irritation flashing in his eyes. This is not the time for trivial matters. Isabella, I know. She persisted gently, keeping her voice low but firm. But the last known position of Gamma Lena's patrol, it was reported near the old Trapper's Ravine, wasn't it? The one the elders call Steam Hollow because of the hidden thermal vents. Nathan frowned, his gaze flicking to the spot on the map Elias had marked earlier. Yes. Why? His tone was clipped, impatient. In Silverwood, she explained. During severe blizzards, trackers learn to look for disturbances near heat sources. Animals seek shelter there, even minimal shelter, and their passage leaves different tracks in the snow, slight melting, altered drift patterns, less prone to immediate obliteration by the wind than tracks in the open. Melt patterns, however faint, or even just the scent of wet fur concentrated near the vents. It might offer a starting point if the usual visual signs are gone completely. Elias looked up from trying to organize another rescue team. The vents. Steam Hollow, he mused, rubbing his chin. They offer minimal shelter, just small overhangs and slightly warmer rock. But she might be right. Alpha. In this whiteout, it's a possibility worth checking. Standard tracking methods are failing. Nathan stared hard at Isabella, his expression a complex mask of conflicting thoughts. He was clearly weighing his ingrained dismissal of her Silverwood ways against the desperation of the situation. Lives were at stake. His Gamma was out there. Finally, with visible reluctance, he gave a curt nod to Elias. Relay that to the search teams operating near the ravine. Focus on thermal anomalies and any unusual track disturbances near the known vent locations. It's a long shot, but check it thoroughly. Isabella retreated immediately, not wanting to intrude further or give him reason to rescind the order. She joined the anxious families in the main hall, quietly offering words of comfort she wasn't sure she felt. helping Alara distribute warm broth and blankets. Her presence was initially met with surprise, then a grudging acceptance as she simply worked alongside them, sharing their vigil without demanding attention or asserting rank. She felt their fear as her own, the shared vulnerability momentarily bridging the gap between her and the pack. Hours crawled by, each minute thick with tension. Then, a triumphant shout went up near the main entrance as a runner burst in, covered in snow but grinning. Elias rushed to meet him, then turned to the hall, a rare, deep look of relief smoothing the harsh lines on his face. "They found Lena's patrol," he announced, his voice ringing through the suddenly silent hall, sheltering in a small ice cave near the largest thermal vent in Steam Hollow. The trackers picked up faint heat signatures and disturbed snow patterns near the rocks, just as the Luna suggested. They're exhausted and frostbitten, but alive. They're bringing them in now. A collective sigh of relief swept through the hall, followed by murmurs and emotional reunions as the news spread. Several pack members looked towards Isabella, who was helping an elderly wolf, with newfound respect, even awe, in their eyes. Nathan entered the hall moments later, having received the news directly. His expression was unreadable as always, but he paused, his gaze finding Isabella across the crowded room. He didn't speak, didn't nod, but the intensity of his look held something different, not warmth, not "that yet," but a grudging acknowledgement, a silent recognition that her silverwood softness might harbor unexpected, life-saving knowledge. The incident marked a subtle but definite shift. While Nathan maintained his public distance and commanding reserve, his outright hostility lessened significantly, replaced by a wary, watchful neutrality. He no longer dismissed her presence entirely. Occasionally, during council discussions on topics where Silverwood knowledge might be relevant, like herbology for the healers or specific border region histories, he would direct a curt question her way, his tone clipped but no longer automatically dismissive. He started observing her more, noticing the quiet competence with which she managed the household staff, who had slowly warmed to her fair treatment, the genuine empathy she showed towards pack members in distress, visiting the sick, comforting a child who'd lost a pet, the sharp intelligence behind her reserved demeanor during debates. He began to see, perhaps unwillingly, that her gentleness wasn't weakness, but a different, quieter kind of strength. The strength of resilience, of keen observation, of deep-rooted loyalty that didn't require loud proclamations or displays of aggression. He saw the way some of the pack elders, like Alara, now sought her out for quiet conversation, valuing her calm perspective and knowledge of old lore. He noticed the children were no longer wary of her, sometimes approaching her with shy curiosity when she sat reading on the terrace. She was slowly, quietly, finding her place, not by demanding it or fighting for it, but by earning it through her consistent actions and quiet dignity. This growing awareness warred constantly with his ingrained prejudices, the bitterness surrounding their forced union, and his own deep-seated grief. The mate bond became harder to ignore, harder to fight. It pulsed with a confusing, volatile mixture of his lingering resentment, his grudging respect, and a burgeoning, unwelcome physical attraction. He found his eyes drawn to the gentle curve of her neck when she bent over her books, the quiet determination in her expressive eyes when she spoke, the way she moved with an understated grace that was so different from the aggressive confidence of Nightclaw females. His wolf, less encumbered by human pride and painful memories, recognized its mate on a primal level, felt the pull, the nascent possessiveness, the overwhelming instinct to protect her from the hostility she still faced. It infuriated him. He hadn't chosen her. This connection, This involuntary softening towards her felt like a betrayal of his own will. His carefully constructed defenses. One crisp afternoon, Isabella was tending to the small herb garden she had managed to establish in a sheltered corner of the stronghold's inner courtyard. Another small act of making this harsh place her own, coaxing life from the rocky soil. She found a quiet satisfaction in nurturing the hardy mountain plants, a connection to the healing arts her mother had taught her. She heard heavy footsteps approach on the stone path and looked up, surprised, to see Nathan standing there, watching her, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He rarely sought her out directly like this, especially not alone. The Southern Border Patrol reported finding strange markers near the Whispering Falls. He stated abruptly, dispensing with any pleasantries. Not rogue signs, deliberate placement, carved stone, any significance in Silverwood lore. Isabella frowned, wiping dirt from her hands onto her sturdy apron. Whispering Falls. It was considered neutral ground for generations, often used for parleys between our packs in times past. Sacred ground, some said. She thought for a moment, accessing the obscure legends she'd read. But some very old legends, usually dismissed as folklore, spoke of hidden pathways through the mountains in that region, marked by specific, ancient symbols, known only to certain old lineages, they said. What did the markers look like? Nathan described them concisely. Small, flat stones etched with interlocking spirals and crescent moons. Isabella's breath hitched. Her eyes widened slightly. Those sound like markers of the Shadow Walkers, she whispered, the name itself sending a chill down her spine despite the afternoon sun. An old, almost forgotten lineage, mentioned only in the most obscure Silverwood scrolls, masters of stealth and mountain passage, rumored to move unseen. They were thought to have died out generations ago, during the early pack wars. Why would their signs appear now? On Nightclaw borders. Nathan's eyes narrowed, instantly grasping the potential implications. Shadow Walkers, associated with any particular faction or historical grievance. They were fiercely independent, Isabella recalled, piecing together fragmented information, mistrustful of alliances, especially between major packs like ours. Some tales linked them, very vaguely, to families on both sides who vehemently opposed the original peace treaties. Long, long ago, families who valued isolation and secrecy above all. The implication hung heavy and ominous in the crisp mountain air. Someone was potentially using ancient secret routes through the mountains. Someone who opposed the current peace. Someone working actively against the treaty, against them. Thank you, Nathan said curtly, his mind clearly already processing this new, dangerous information. He turned to leave, then paused, hesitating for a fraction of a second. He glanced back at her, then at the small rows of herbs, the garden, its. He seemed to search for an appropriate, non-committal word, finally settling for practical. It wasn't praise, not really, but it was the closest he'd come. It was an acknowledgement, however grudging, of her contribution, her effort to bring something useful, something alive, to this stone fortress. As he walked away with his long, purposeful strides, Isabella felt the distinct thrum of the bond, carrying not just his usual intensity and simmering anger, but a new layer of complex thought, of reluctant connection, and perhaps a shared sense of foreboding. The ice wasn't gone, but hairline fractures were definitely appearing, spreading beneath the surface. A thaw, slow and tentative, had irrevocably begun. But the discovery of the Shadow Walker markers cast a chilling new shadow over everything, hinting that the internal threats they faced might be far more complex, ancient, and dangerous than either of them had imagined. The discovery of the Shadow Walker symbols sent ripples of deep unease through the Nightclaw command structure. Nathan, recognizing the potential gravity of the situation, immediately intensified border security around the Whispering Falls region and beyond. He dispatched specialized tracking teams, including some older wolves, whose families might retain fragmented memories of the old legends or recognize the ancient signs. He didn't share the full, alarming details about the shadow walkers with the general pack, wary of causing widespread panic or, more critically, alerting those who might be involved internally. But the increased vigilance, the hushed meetings in the council chamber, and the grim expressions on the faces of the Alpha and his inner circle were palpable throughout the stronghold. Isabella found herself drawn into these confidential discussions more frequently. Her encyclopedic knowledge of Silverwood history, obscure lore, and interpack genealogy, once dismissed as irrelevant soft knowledge, was now proving to be a valuable, perhaps essential, asset. Nathan still treated her with a degree of reserve in front of others, maintaining his alpha authority. But in their private discussions about the markers and their possible meaning, the dismissive contempt was entirely gone. It was replaced by a focused, almost clinical assessment of her input. He listened intently. He considered her theories. Sometimes, after intense debate, he even conceded a point, though always grudgingly, as if admitting her value cost him something personal. The dynamic shifted from Alpha, issuing commands, to two minds grappling with a shared, dangerous puzzle. This subtle but significant shift in the Alpha's attitude towards his Luna did not go unnoticed by Kale and his increasingly disgruntled faction. They saw Isabella's growing, albeit minimal and strictly advisory, influence as a direct threat to their own ambitions and narrative. If Nathan started openly relying on the Silverwood Runt for strategic insights, their carefully constructed story of his weakness, his softening due to the treaty and his unwanted mate, would be fatally undermined. The subtle incidents targeting Isabella escalated, becoming more pointed and malicious. Supplies she requested for Alara and the healer's den went missing or were mysteriously contaminated. Crucial messages intended for her regarding potential leads from Silverwood contacts were delayed or lost. Vicious rumors questioning her loyalty to Nightclaw, suggesting she was secretly feeding information back to her father, surfaced with renewed vigor, whispered in the training yards and common areas. Isabella recognized the pattern of deliberate sabotage immediately, but refused to be drawn into open confrontation, knowing that was likely Kale's goal, to provoke a reaction that would make her look unstable or paranoid. She documented the incidents quietly, noting times, places, and potential witnesses. She redoubled her efforts in the areas she could control, working closely with the few pack members who had shown her consistent kindness, like the elderly head healer, Alara, who openly respected Isabella's knowledge of herbs and healing techniques learned from her mother. She focused on her duties, demonstrating competence and unwavering dedication, letting her actions serve as a silent rebuttal to the whispers. Nathan, preoccupied with the escalating border threats, the disturbing Shadow Walker enigma, and the simmering internal dissent he knew Kale was fueling, seemed initially unaware of the specifics of the targeted campaign against Isabella. Or perhaps, Isabella thought bleakly during moments of weary frustration. He simply didn't care enough to intervene in what he might still consider petty pack squabbles beneath his notice. The mate bond still resonated between them, a confusing, powerful tangle of his grudging respect, simmering frustration at his own conflicting feelings, and that undeniable, unwelcome protective pull. But it hadn't yet translated into active, public protection or expressed trust. He hadn't claimed her fully, not yet. The turning point, the moment everything shifted irrevocably, came during the annual blood moon hunt. a sacred and ancient Nightclaw tradition, held under the light of the first full moon after the winter solstice. It involved the pack's strongest hunters tracking and bringing down formidable prey, usually elusive mountain rams or snow leopards, in the treacherous high peaks. It was more than just a hunt. It was a ritual reaffirming their pack's strength, their connection to their harsh territory, and their unity under the Alpha. It was inherently dangerous, undertaken in challenging terrain where skill, courage, and teamwork were paramount. By long-standing tradition, the Alpha led the primary hunt party targeting the most challenging quarry, while other teams, usually led by the Beta and Gamma, covered flanking territories. The Luna's traditional role was largely ceremonial, overseeing the elaborate preparations for the hunt and the celebratory feast upon the hunter's successful return, blessing the warriors and tending to the shrine of their ancestors. This year, however, during the final council meeting before the hunt, Kale made a bold, provocative suggestion, directing it pointedly at Nathan, but clearly aimed at Isabella. "Alpha," he began, his tone carefully respectful but laden with challenge. "Perhaps this year, the Luna should accompany one of the secondary hunting teams. It would be a valuable opportunity for her to better understand our most sacred traditions firsthand, to demonstrate her integration into our ways, to prove her mettle." Several of Kale's known supporters immediately murmured agreement, adding to the pressure. The implication was clear. Isabella was still too much of an outsider, untested in the crucible of Nightclaw tradition, perhaps even incapable of handling it. Nathan's eyes narrowed instantly, fixed on Kyle with dangerous intensity. He knew exactly what this was: a public test, a provocation designed to put him in an impossible position. He glanced at Isabella, seated quietly beside Lena at the council table. Her expression was perfectly calm, revealing nothing of the sudden apprehension that clenched her stomach. Participating in the Blood Moon hunt was a significant, perilous undertaking, physically demanding and potentially lethal, especially for someone unfamiliar with the specific terrain, the pack's unique hunting signals, and the aggressive tactics required. It was also a perfect chance for Kale's faction to isolate her, perhaps even arrange an accident far from the Alpha's direct oversight. Isabella met Nathan's intense gaze across the table. She saw the conflict warring within him. Denying Kale's request might look like he was shielding her, protecting her out of weakness or inappropriate favor, confirming the very whispers Kale was trying to encourage. Allowing it placed her in undeniable, potentially fatal, danger. She wouldn't give Kale the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "I would be honored to learn more of the pack's sacred traditions, Alpha," she said steadily, her voice clear and unwavering, refusing to show the fear churning inside her. "If you permit it." A long, tense silence stretched, filling the council chamber. Nathan seemed to weigh the risks, his gaze flicking between Kale's challenging smirk and Isabella's composed face. The mate bond thrummed violently, a low growl of possessiveness and protective instinct stirring deep within him, warring fiercely with his pride, his strategic considerations, and his lingering resentment. Letting her go felt like throwing her to the wolves. Keeping her back felt like admitting defeat to Kale. Finally, his decision made, he gave a single, curt nod. "Very well. Luna Isabella will accompany Gamma Lena's team." He turned his piercing gaze on Lena. "Gamma, you will ensure her safety. She is your responsibility." Lena's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, the weight of the command settling heavily on her shoulders. She nodded sharply. "As you command, Alpha." She knew, as did Nathan, that this placed an immense responsibility and potential blame squarely on her. Kale smiled. A brief, almost undetectable flash of triumph lighting his eyes before being quickly masked by a look of solemn approval. His trap was set. The night of the hunt arrived, biting cold and unnervingly clear. The blood moon, larger and redder than a normal full moon, cast an ethereal, bloody light over the snow-dusted peaks, making the familiar landscape seem alien and menacing. Isabella, dressed in practical furs and leathers provided by Luna, functional, durable, but lacking any silverwood softness, felt a volatile mixture of trepidation and a strange, primal excitement. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, eager for the run, the chase, the connection to the wild, overriding her human fear. Lena's team consisted of 5 seasoned hunters, including, ominously, Rorik, one of the wolves Isabella had overheard conspiring with Kale weeks ago. Lena herself was all business, focused and professional, giving Isabella concise, clipped instructions before they set out. Stay close behind me. Follow commands instantly. Do not engage prey directly unless ordered. Your primary role is observation. As they moved swiftly into the high country, the air grew thin and bitingly cold. The pace was relentless, the terrain treacherous, navigating icy scree slopes and narrow, wind-blasted ridges under the eerie crimson moonlight. Isabella drew on her shifter stamina, pushing herself to keep up. Her senses heightened, absorbing the sights, sounds, and scents of the hunt with fierce concentration. She watched the coordinated movements of the Nightclaw hunters, their silent hand signals, their deep instinctual understanding of the mountain environment, their controlled aggression. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They picked up the trail of a large, reclusive mountain cat, its scent sharp and musky on the biting air. The chase led them deeper into the wilderness, through narrow, echoing gorges and across windswept, exposed ridges where a misstep could mean a fatal fall. During a brief pause, while Lena moved slightly ahead to scout a difficult passage, Rorik, moving behind Isabella, accidentally stumbled, bumping into her hard near the edge of a steep, icy slope leading down into a dark ravine. She cried out involuntarily as her feet slipped on the treacherous, moon-slicked surface, her arms pinwheeling for balance. Before Lena or the other hunters, slightly ahead or behind, could fully react, a dark shape detached itself from the deeper shadows nearby, moving with startling speed. Kale. He hadn't been assigned to their team. He should have been miles away with another group. He lunged, not towards Isabella to grab her, but striking Rorik hard on the shoulder, sending the older wolf staggering back from the edge with a grunt of surprise. "Careless! Rorik!" Kale snapped, instantly positioning himself between Isabella and the precipice, effectively blocking her view and any aid from others momentarily. He offered Isabella a hand, his face a perfect mask of solicitous concern. "Are you all right, Luna? That was a close call." Isabella, heart pounding like a drum against her ribs, regained her balance, pointedly ignoring his offered hand. She saw the brief flicker of surprised fury in Rorik's eyes before it was quickly masked. She understood instantly, with chilling clarity. This wasn't an accident. It was a setup, clumsily executed. Rorik was meant to push her over the edge, or at least cause a serious fall. Kale, conveniently nearby, would then save her, or perhaps fail heroically, appearing the concerned protector while simultaneously implicating the clumsy Rorik and eliminating or incapacitating Isabella, proving her fragility to the pack. But Kale's timing had been slightly off, or Rorik's push less effective than planned. Foiled perhaps by Isabella's innate shifter balance, Lena scrambled back down the trail, her eyes narrowed, taking in the scene, Isabella near the edge, Rorik rubbing his shoulder, Kale standing protectively between them. What happened here? Her voice was sharp steel. Just a slip. Gamma, Kale said smoothly, stepping away from Isabella. Rorik lost his balance near the Luna on the ice. No harm done, thankfully. Lena looked from Kale's overly concerned face to Rorik's sullen expression, then to Isabella's pale but composed features. Her gaze was sharp, missing nothing. She knew something was wrong, horribly wrong. Maintain formation, she ordered curtly, her eyes lingering on Kale with open suspicion. You're well outside your designated hunting zone. Kale saw the cat track heading this way. Gamma, Kale replied easily, falling into step with them as if he belonged there all along. Thought my team could assist in flanking it. Strength in numbers on dangerous ground like this. Lena didn't reply, but her posture grew even more vigilant. The hunt continued, but the atmosphere was now thick with unspoken suspicion and menace. Isabella stayed hyper-alert, acutely aware of Kale's calculated presence behind her, Rorik's simmering resentment radiating from nearby, and Lena's watchful, protective eyes constantly scanning their surroundings and her own team members. Later, as they finally cornered the large, powerful mountain cat in a rocky, dead-end basin, the situation escalated dramatically. The cat, cornered and desperate, fought with terrifying ferocity, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. During the chaotic struggle, as wolves shifted partially or fully, dodging slashing claws and feinting attacks, Rorik seemingly aiming a lunge towards the cat as it momentarily turned, launched himself forward in a way that put him on a direct collision course with an unprepared Isabella, who was focused on avoiding the cat's raking hind claws. This time, there was no mistaking the intent. It was blatant, murderous. But Isabella, her senses screaming danger, anticipating betrayal after the earlier incident, reacted instinctively, driven by pure survival instinct. Instead of trying to dodge away on the uneven, rocky ground, she dropped low in a heartbeat, shifting partially without conscious thought, claws extending from her fingertips with a faint snick, eyes flashing gold, and used Rorik's own momentum against him. She twisted, deflecting his lunge with her shoulder, while simultaneously lashing out defensively with her newly clawed hand at the attacking cat, which was dangerously close. Her claws tore through its thick flank fur, drawing blood. It happened in mere seconds. Rorik, his lunge deflected, stumbled badly, off balance and momentarily exposed directly in front of the enraged cat. The wounded animal roared in pain and fury, instantly turning its attention from Isabella to the closer, more vulnerable target. Before anyone else could intervene, it swiped viciously, its claws catching Rorik across the arm and shoulder, tearing through heavy leather and flesh, eliciting a howl of pain from the older wolf, Kale, who had been maneuvering again, perhaps for another staged rescue, was momentarily blocked by Isabella's unexpected, fierce defense and Rorik's sudden fall. Lena and her remaining hunters surged forward as one, their own forms blurring as they shifted, dispatching the wounded, distracted cat swiftly and efficiently. Silence fell abruptly, broken only by Rorik's pained groans as he clutched his bleeding arm, blood welling darkly between his fingers. Everyone stared at Isabella. She stood breathing heavily, adrenaline singing through her veins, her claws slowly retracting, her eyes fading back from shifter gold to their normal brown. She hadn't just avoided the attack, she had defended herself effectively, turned the aggressor's move against him, even if inadvertently causing his injury, and had actively, successfully contributed to bringing down the dangerous prey. She hadn't cowered. She hadn't frozen. She hadn't waited to be rescued. Lena knelt beside Rorik, her face grim as she quickly assessed his deep wounds. "Kale, help me get him bound up. He needs the healers. Now. We're heading back immediately." Her voice was cold steel, and her gaze, when it flicked towards Isabella, held a new, grudging, but undeniable respect. Kale's face was a mask of barely concealed fury, his elaborate plan completely, disastrously foiled. He had intended to frame Rorik while saving the Luna, cementing his own heroic image and eliminating two problems at once. Instead, Isabella had saved herself, inadvertently exposed Rorik's aggression, and demonstrated a fierce, competent survival instinct no one, least of all him, had expected from the soft Silverwood Luna. Word of the incident, carried by the wind, or perhaps by the subtle communication network of the pack, somehow preceded them back to the stronghold. When Lena's depleted team returned, carrying their hard-won prey and supporting the heavily bleeding, shame-faced Rorik, the pack gathered in the main courtyard, alerted by the early return and the scent of serious injury. The story spread like wildfire, whispered from wolf to wolf, not of the Luna being weak or needing rescue, but of her quick thinking, her unexpected defensive skill, her quiet courage under direct attack during the sacred hunt. Nathan was waiting for them, standing near the entrance to the lodge, his face an unreadable mask of granite, his icy eyes missing nothing. He listened intently, without interruption, to Lena's concise, factual report of the hunt, the accident, and the final confrontation, her words carefully chosen, but leaving no doubt about the sequence of events. He looked at Rorik's serious injuries, then at Kale's barely concealed frustration and carefully neutral expression. And finally, his gaze settled fully on Isabella. She stood tall, weary to her bones but composed, streaks of dirt and a smear of blood, the cat's, not hers, stark against her pale cheek. She met his gaze directly, neither defiant nor submissive, simply present. Waiting, he stepped forward deliberately, stopping directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the scent of pine, cold stone, and his own unique musk. The pack held its collective breath. The mate bond vibrated between them, raw and potent, charged with the residual adrenaline of the hunt. The danger survived, and something entirely new, something overwhelming, his shock, his confusion, his unwilling, staggering admiration. He reached out, his gloved hand moving slowly, deliberately, gently touching her cheek, his thumb brushing away the smear of drying blood. It was the first time he had ever touched her with anything resembling care, anything personal. The unexpected contact sent a jolt like lightning through both of them, a silent explosion on the mate bond. "You are unharmed." His voice was low, rough, meant only for her ears, yet carrying an intensity that resonated deep within her. "I am unharmed, Alpha," she replied, her voice remarkably steady, despite the tremor his touch ignited deep inside her. He held her gaze for a long, breathless moment, the icy blue depths swirling with a storm of emotions she couldn't fully decipher. Anger at Kale, at Rorik, at himself, profound relief, raw possessiveness, utter confusion. He saw her then. She knew it, truly saw her for the first time, not as the Silverwood political pawn, not as the unwanted burden, but as Isabella, resilient, resourceful, unexpectedly fierce, brave. His mate, "Good," he said gruffly, withdrawing his hand almost abruptly, as if burned by the contact, by the implications. He turned to the assembled pack, his voice regaining its usual commanding tone, though perhaps with a subtle new weight. "The Blood Moon hunt is concluded. See to the injured. Prepare the feast." His authority was absolute. He glanced briefly, pointedly, at Kale, a look that promised future, intense scrutiny, before striding away towards the Alpha's lodge, leaving the pack buzzing with speculation. The pack members murmured amongst themselves, their perceptions irrevocably altered. The dismissive whispers about the Silverwood runt died down, replaced by grudging respect and intense curiosity. Isabella, the unwanted Luna, had not only survived the deadly test Kale had set for her, but she had turned it on its head, proving her worth in a way that resonated deeply with core Nightclaw values: strength, resilience, and courage in the face of danger. As Isabella walked towards her chambers, emotionally and physically exhausted, but strangely exhilarated, she knew something fundamental, something irreversible, had changed between her and Nathan, and within the pack itself. The incident on the hunt was the midpoint, the undeniable turning point. Nathan could no longer easily deny her strength, nor could he continue to deny the powerful, insistent pull of the bond connecting them. The thaw had reached a critical point, melting away layers of prejudice and misunderstanding. But Kale's foiled plot had also brought the simmering rebellion dangerously closer to the surface. The danger was far from over. It was merely entering a new, more complex, and potentially even more perilous phase. The aftermath of the Blood Moon hunt settled over the Nightclaw pack like an uneasy, watchful truce. Isabella's actions had undeniably earned her a significant measure of respect, silencing the most vocal critics and forcing many, even those initially hostile, to reconsider their judgment. Warriors who had once sneered now offered curt nods of acknowledgement. Females who had whispered about her softness now observed her with cautious curiosity. Kale, though publicly maintaining his smooth facade of loyalty and expressing outrage over Rorik's clumsiness and the danger Isabella faced, was clearly furious beneath the surface. His ambition had been thwarted, his methods momentarily exposed, and his target had emerged stronger, not weaker. He retreated slightly from the forefront, becoming more watchful, more subtle, his charm replaced by a colder calculation as he reassessed his strategy. Rorik, recovering slowly from his injuries, was sullen and largely isolated, his failed attempt to harm the Luna marking him with undeniable suspicion, regardless of Kale's attempts to frame it as an accident. The most significant change, however, was in Nathan. The towering wall of ice between him and Isabella hadn't vanished entirely, but it was irrevocably riddled with cracks, fissures opened by grudging respect and the undeniable power of the mate bond he could no longer effectively suppress. He began to seek her out more often, initially under the guise of discussing pack matters, the ongoing, frustrating investigation into the Shadow Walker markers, resource allocation adjustments after the harsh weather, reports from Alara in the Healer's Den, where Isabella now spent considerable time assisting. But his questions sometimes strayed, hesitantly, into more personal territory. He asked about Silverwood hunting techniques, comparing them to Nightclaw methods. About her family back home, his inquiries brief, almost clinical, yet betraying curiosity. About the specific training she had received as an Alpha's daughter. He observed her interactions with the pack with a new, focused intensity, noting the quiet way she offered practical support and genuine comfort to a recently widowed pack member. The patience she showed, explaining a complex healing technique involving rare mountain herbs to Alara's young apprentices. The quiet firmness with which she handled a dispute over dwindling supplies in the communal kitchens. Finding a fair solution without raising her voice, he was seeing her, truly seeing her, not just as a political entity or an unwanted mate imposed upon him, but as a capable, intelligent, compassionate, and unexpectedly resilient individual. A Luna who led not through overt dominance or aggression, but through quiet strength, empathy, and sharp intellect. This dawning realization unsettled him profoundly. The mate bond pulsed with increasing intensity, a constant, low hum beneath his skin, fueling a possessiveness and a protective instinct that he struggled daily to reconcile with his long-held resentment and bitterness. He found himself watching her across the main hall during meals, tracking her movements within the stronghold subconsciously, feeling a low warning growl rumble deep in his chest when Kale or his known associates got too close to her. He hated the feeling, hated this erosion of his control over his own emotions, yet found himself powerless to deny its growing power over him. He started experiencing flashes of shared emotion through the bond, her frustration when a healing poultice failed, her quiet satisfaction when her herb garden yielded its first harvest, her underlying fear whenever Kale approached. Isabella felt the shift acutely, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. Nathan's proximity was no longer merely tolerable or tense, it was electric. The brief moments of eye contact across a room lingered longer, charged with unspoken questions and acknowledgments. Casual, unintentional touches, his fingers brushing hers when handing over a map, his arm grazing hers as they navigated a crowded corridor, sent sparks along her nerves, making her breath catch. The bond sang between them, a complex, evolving melody of conflicting emotions, his confusion and burgeoning, reluctant attraction clashing against his ingrained defenses, her cautious hope mingled with lingering fear and a growing, reciprocal pull towards the powerful, wounded man beneath the harsh alpha exterior. They hadn't spoken directly of the incident on the hunt, nor of the undeniable connection strengthening daily between them, but it existed, a palpable force in the air whenever they were near, a silent conversation happening beneath the surface of their guarded interactions. This tentative softening, this slow thaw, created an opportunity for understanding, but also significantly increased the danger. Kale and his faction, particularly the hardline traditionalists like Gavril, saw Nathan's changing attitude towards Isabella not as acceptance, but as confirmation of their deepest fears. The Alpha was being softened, influenced, perhaps even controlled, by the outsider, by the Silverwood Witch. Their discontent festered, gaining a desperate urgency. The continued, baffling appearance and disappearance of the Shadow Walker markers added another volatile layer of complexity. Were Kale's people somehow involved, using ancient symbols they didn't fully understand? Or was there another, older conspiracy at play, manipulating the current unrest for its own hidden ends? Could the two threats be linked? Nathan, increasingly suspicious of Kale but still lacking concrete, undeniable proof of outright treason that would justify challenging him directly without fracturing the pack, decided on a calculated, dangerous risk. He needed to understand the full scope of the threat, both internal and external, and he realized, with a final surrender of his pride, that Isabella's unique insights, her knowledge of lore outside Nightclaw's sphere, her different perspective, were crucial. One evening, after the stronghold had settled into quiet, he summoned her not to the formal council chamber, but to his private study, a room even more austere and functional than the rest of the lodge, dominated by tactical maps, weapons displays, and stacks of patrol reports. A heavy scent of old leather, metal, and Nathan himself permeated the air. "Isabella," he began, dispensing with formality, his tone low and serious as he gestured for her to sit opposite him at the heavy wooden table. "The situation with Kale is escalating faster than I anticipated. My internal sources, Loyal wolves I trust implicitly confirm he's actively rallying support among the younger warriors and disgruntled traditionalists, speaking more openly now of necessary change for the pack's survival. He slammed a fist lightly, frustratedly, on the table. He's careful, damn him, leaving no direct evidence of treason, always phrasing his dissent as concern for the pack's strength. But the whispers are growing louder, more defiant. He paused, his icy eyes meeting hers across the table, holding her gaze. And these shadow walker signs keep appearing, always near strategic points, old watchtowers, hidden passes, water sources, always vanishing before patrols can investigate thoroughly. It feels connected to the unrest, but I can't see the precise link. Isabella listened intently, absorbing the gravity of his words. Kale preys on dissatisfaction. Alpha, she said quietly. The harsh winter depleting resources. The strain of upholding the treaty obligations. The fear of change that peace brings after generations of war. He twists these legitimate concerns into grievances against your leadership. He suggests the alliance with Silverwood, and by extension, me, is the source of the pack's problems. A weakness that must be purged. Igno, Nathan growled, the frustration evident in the tight line of his jaw. But the Shadow Walkers, they don't fit Kale's simple narrative of Nightclaw supremacy and isolationism. According to the lore you uncovered, they were outsiders themselves, isolationists who distrusted all major packs, unless. Isabella mused, thinking aloud, leaning forward slightly, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone else is using the old ways. Someone manipulating Kale, perhaps, using his ambition and his faction's discontent as a cover, a diversion, for a different, older agenda. An older resentment against the treaty itself, maybe even dating back to your father's or grandfather's reigns. When the first peace attempts were made, Nathan frowned, his brow furrowed deep in thought as he considered this possibility. His father, and his grandfather before him, had indeed faced fierce opposition from traditionalist factions within the Nightclaw Pack when they first proposed truces decades ago. Could this be a resurgence of that old, deeply buried dissent, finding new life in the current climate? We need proof, Nathan stated flatly, his voice regaining its decisive edge. Solid, irrefutable proof to expose Kale, or whoever is truly pulling the strings, before they fracture this pack completely, perhaps even incite open conflict. He looked directly at Isabella then, a silent, almost unwilling request clear in his intense gaze. He needed her knowledge, her perspective, her uncanny ability to see the subtle currents and historical connections he, steeped only in Nightclaw ways, might miss. What do you propose, Alpha? Isabella asked softly, recognizing the significance of this moment. A risk, he admitted, his voice dropping slightly. A calculated one. We need to draw them out, force their hand into revealing themselves. And, he paused, the next words clearly difficult for him, requiring him to swallow his pride. We need to do it together. He finally met her eyes again. The internal battle resolved. I need your help, Isabella, your knowledge of Silverwood ways, your understanding of these symbols and the history behind them, your observations. It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting he needed her. Not just her specific knowledge, but her mind, her perspective, her partnership, an admission, however tentative and born of necessity, of an uneasy alliance forming in the face of a common, insidious enemy. Isabella felt a surge of determination, pushing aside her lingering fear and caution. This was bigger than their personal issues. I will help, Alpha, she said firmly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. For the sake of the pack, for the sake of the peace our families fought and sacrificed for. Good, he nodded, a measure of the crushing tension seeming to leave his shoulders, replaced by focused resolve. My most trusted trackers are watching Kale's every move, but he's slippery as an eel. Lena is quietly monitoring the warrior ranks, assessing loyalties, identifying potential weak links Kale might exploit. Elias is managing logistics, ensuring our loyal core remains strong and supplied. Your role will be crucial to decipher these signs, to use your knowledge of cross-border lore to predict their movements, perhaps even identify who among the older generation might possess this dangerous, ancient knowledge of the Shadow Walkers. I will need unrestricted access to the oldest pack archives, Isabella stated immediately. Texts that might mention the Shadow Walkers in more detail. Family lineage scrolls deemed sensitive. Records of past internal disputes. Anything mentioning families known for opposing the treaties. Granted. Nathan agreed without hesitation. Anything you need. Ilara holds the keys to the deepest archives. I will instruct her to give you full cooperation. He paused, his gaze becoming intense, protective. Be careful, Isabella. Kale already sees you as a direct threat now, especially after the hunt. And whoever is manipulating things from the shadows will see you as a threat too. They know you understand things they thought long buried and forgotten. The undisguised warning resonated deeply with the protective thrum of the mate bond, a low vibration that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Not of fear this time, but of connection. I will be careful, Alpha, she assured him, feeling a strange sense of belonging, of purpose, she hadn't felt since leaving Silverwood. Over the next few days, they worked in concert, a strange, intense dynamic forming between them. They spent long hours together poring over ancient, brittle maps and dusty scrolls in the deepest, rarely visited levels of the pack archives, the air thick with the scent of decay and forgotten history. Their shoulders occasionally brushed as they leaned over fragile documents, their shared focus creating an unexpected, almost subconscious intimacy. They held quiet, urgent discussions late into the night in his study, analyzing cryptic patrol reports, debating theories about motives and connections, the remnants of their former hostility dissolving in the face of shared purpose. Nathan found himself consistently impressed by her sharp intellect, her methodical approach, her ability to connect seemingly disparate pieces of information. Isabella saw glimpses of the immense burden he carried, the deep, fierce loyalty he felt towards his pack, hidden beneath his harsh, demanding exterior. The scars left by his past losses that drove his relentless pursuit of strength and security. The animosity between them had largely melted away, replaced by the intensity of their shared mission and the undeniable, ever-present pull of the bond. Moments of acute awareness became more frequent, harder to ignore, the way his scent, pine and mountain storm and something uniquely him, seemed to fill her senses whenever he was close. The way her quiet, unexpected laughter during a rare moment of shared discovery about a particularly absurd historical footnote made his heart jolt unexpectedly in his chest. The attraction simmered beneath the surface of their work, unspoken but powerful, a dangerous undercurrent to their already precarious situation. Their combined efforts began to yield results. They discovered fragmented, heavily censored information about the Shadow Walkers, mentions of a cadet branch of an old, disgraced Nightclaw family, the Stonefangs, who had vehemently opposed Nathan's grandfather's initial peace overtures decades ago. These Stonefangs were rumored to have intermarried with Silverwood isolationists generations prior, potentially acquiring forbidden knowledge of the hidden cross-border pathways from both sides. Official pack records insisted the direct Stonefang line had died out completely 2 generations ago after a failed, bloody uprising against Nathan's grandfather. But Isabella, meticulously combing through secondary archives, old healers' logs detailing treatments for off-record individuals, trade manifests mentioning transactions in remote border settlements, informal journals kept by previous Lunas, found disturbing discrepancies. Subtle mentions of individuals bearing Stonefang characteristics living quietly, deliberately keeping a low profile on the pack's furthest periphery. Their names changed or obscured. One name surfaced repeatedly in connection with illicit trade in forbidden artifacts and whispers of knowledge of the old mountain secrets: Gavril. Gavril, the older, respected traditionalist wolf Isabella had overheard, conspiring with Kale in the library weeks ago. He wasn't just a disgruntled elder. A faded entry in a former Luna's personal journal mentioned his grandmother had been a Stonefang who survived the purge by marrying into a minor, unassuming family. He had the lineage, the deep-seated historical resentment, and potentially the forbidden knowledge. Ithos to be him, Isabella breathed, pointing a trembling finger at the faded journal entry, mentioning Gavril's connection to mountain secrets passed down through the female line. She showed it to Nathan, her eyes wide with dawning certainty. He's using Kale. Kale is the face, the charismatic voice rallying the discontented warriors, blinded by his own ambition. But Gavril is the one with the historical grievance, the Stonefang blood, the knowledge of the Shadow Walkers. He's the one manipulating events from behind the scenes, playing a long game. Nathan stared at the journal, his expression turning grim, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Gavril was a respected elder, a veteran warrior, part of his own council. Accusing him without irrefutable proof would be disastrous, potentially splitting the pack even further, playing right into the conspirators' hands. Kale provides the muscle, the youthful energy, and the plausible deniability. Nathan reasoned aloud, his voice tight with controlled anger. Gavril provides the strategy, the ancient knowledge, the connection to the past, maybe even the link to any actual remnants of the Shadow Walkers operating outside our territory. They needed definitive proof, proof that tied Gavril directly to the markers, the sabotage, and potentially the Shadow Walkers themselves. They decided on a dangerous gambit: feed carefully constructed misinformation through channels they suspected were monitored by Kale and, therefore, Gavril. They would let slip evidence, suggesting they were close to uncovering the main Shadow Walker pathway, focusing their supposed search efforts on a specific, remote, and strategically unimportant region, the desolate Serpent's Pass. Their hope was that Gavril, believing his most valuable secrets were about to be exposed, would make a desperate move to protect the Frio location or destroy incriminating evidence elsewhere. Lena, now fully briefed on their suspicions, and fiercely loyal after witnessing Isabella's courage and Nathan's growing trust in her, was tasked with subtly spreading the false information among the warrior ranks. Elias ensured only the most loyal, hand-picked warriors were assigned to the highly visible search party heading towards Serpent's Pass, creating a convincing diversionary tactic. Meanwhile, Nathan and Isabella, along with a small, elite team of their most trusted fighters, including Lena, who would peel off from the main search party, planned to secretly monitor another location entirely: the crumbling ruins of an ancient Nightclaw watchtower near the Whispering Falls. This location was historically linked to the Stonefangs in old records, and was situated precisely where several Shadow Walker markers had recently been found, and then mysteriously removed. The night they set their plan in motion was moonless, heavy clouds obscuring the stars entirely. A storm was brewing in the distance, the air thick, humid, and electric with anticipation. They moved stealthily through the darkness towards the ruins, their shifter senses on high alert, every snap of a twig sounding unnaturally loud. Isabella felt a thrum of anxiety mixed with fierce resolve. Beside her, Nathan was a figure of coiled tension, his power radiating in the confined space of their hidden observation post, overlooking the darkened, skeletal ruins. Hours passed in strained, absolute silence. The wind picked up, whistling mournfully through the crumbling stones below. Then movement. Several dark figures emerged cautiously from the dense woods surrounding the ruins, moving with the practiced stealth of experienced operatives. They weren't Kale's young hotheads, these were older wolves, moving with grim, deliberate purpose, and leading them, unmistakable even in the deep gloom, was the stooped but commanding figure of Gavril. They carried digging tools and bundles, heading directly towards a section of the old tower's foundation that looked like nothing more than undisturbed rubble to the untrained eye. Working quickly and efficiently, they began clearing stones, revealing a hidden complex mechanism of interlocking stones and levers. Cleverly concealed beneath the debris, the entrance to a hidden passage. The pathway. Nathan breathed beside Isabella, his voice tight with cold fury. He knew all along, just as Gavril reached down to activate the opening mechanism. Another figure emerged abruptly from the shadows on the opposite side of the ruins, confronting him. Kale. His face was contorted with suspicion and dawning rage. "What is this, Gavril?" Kale demanded, his voice sharp, cutting through the wind. "You told me the Luna was the threat." That Nathan was blinded by the treaty, weakening the pack. "You used my warriors, my name, my ambitions, all for this. Access to some forgotten tunnel." Gavril turned slowly, his aged face hardening into a mask of contempt. "You were a means to an end, boy, a useful tool. Your youthful ambition and resentment made you easy to manipulate. This path is the key to restoring true Nightclaw power, the power your precious Alpha squandered on peace treaties and Silverwood alliances. The Stonefangs will rise again, and those who know the old ways, our ways, will rule these mountains once more." "You lied to me," Kale snarled, betrayal and fury warring in his voice. "You planned to discard me once you had what you wanted." He took a step forward, his hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. "Did you truly think I'd share power with an arrogant, ignorant upstart like you?" Gavril sneered dismissively. "You served your purpose by dividing the pack and distracting the Alpha." He gestured sharply to his followers, hard-faced wolves loyal to his ancient lineage. "Seize him. He knows too much now." Kale reacted instantly, not with surrender, but with cornered animal ferocity. He shifted partially, claws extending, teeth bared in a snarl. "You won't take me without a fight, old man." Chaos erupted in the ruins. Kale fought with the desperate ferocity of a wolf betrayed, lashing out furiously at Gavril's men who moved to surround him. Gavril, surprisingly agile for his age, directed the attack, barking orders, his eyes gleaming with ruthless intent. "Now!" Nathan commanded his hidden team. They burst from their observation post, Lena leading the charge, their own battle cries piercing the night. The element of surprise was total. Gavril's followers, caught completely off guard between Kale's desperate defense and the sudden, terrifying appearance of their Alpha and his elite guard, faltered, their attack dissolving into chaos. The clash was brutal, but mercifully brief. Nathan, shifting into his massive, dark-furred wolf form in a blur of motion, became a whirlwind of controlled fury, personally tackling and subduing Gavril, slamming the old wolf against the tower wall with enough force to stun him. Luna and her warriors, fighting with practiced efficiency, quickly overpowered Gavril's remaining, shocked followers. Kale, injured, and seeing his ambitions utterly shattered, tried to flee into the darkness, but was swiftly intercepted and pinned by Elias, who had silently circled around their flank during the initial charge. It seemed like a clear victory. The traitors were captured, the conspiracy exposed, the hidden path revealed. Nathan shifted back, turning towards Isabella, relief warring with the lingering adrenaline in his eyes. The bond pulsed strongly between them, a silent acknowledgement of their shared success, their gamble having paid off. But then came the horrifying twist. As Nathan roughly secured Gavril's arms, the old wolf, despite his defeat, let out a chilling, triumphant laugh that echoed eerily in the ruins. "You think this is over, Alpha. You think I was the only one that mattered. You stopped me, yes. But you didn't stop the message." "What message?" Nathan demanded, tightening his grip, shaking the older wolf slightly. "The signal," Gavril rasped, a fanatic gleam entering his eyes, looking past Nathan towards the darkness. "Sent the moment that fool Kale confronted me. An automated alert, tied to this entrance. A signal to our true allies. Real shadow walkers, not just legends or scattered remnants, a hidden enclave, waiting patiently across the border for generations. They know the Nightclaw Alpha is distracted, his pack divided. They know the ancient path is vulnerable. They know the time is right. They are coming, as if on cue." A sudden, piercingly alien howl echoed from the direction of the Whispering Falls, answered almost immediately by others, closer, much closer than they should be. These were not Nightclaw howls, nor Silverwood. They were different, colder, sharper, filled with chilling predatory intent. Panic, cold, and sharp, seized Isabella. The falls, the markers weren't just pathfinders. She realized aloud, horror dawning in her eyes. They were part of a network, signals, activation points for the main route. Elias rushed up, his face grim, straining to listen past the wind. "Alpha," multiple contacts approaching fast from the Silverwood border. Moving with unnatural speed, heading directly for the Falls Pass. "Far more than we can handle here." Gavril laughed again, a harsh, broken sound of pure malice. "Fools, while you hunted shadows within your own walls, distracted by petty ambition and forced mates, the real threat gathered outside, waiting for my sign. They will reclaim these mountains, their ancestral pathways, and your precious Luna's home pack." He spat the words out. "Silverwood will burn for this cursed alliance. They will pay for betraying the old ways." The hard-won victory turned instantly to ash in their mouths. They hadn't just uncovered an internal plot, they had, unknowingly, triggered an invasion. Gavril wasn't just seeking power within the pack, he was a facilitator, a traitor opening the door for an older, far more dangerous enemy. An enemy tied to the very peace treaty Nathan and Isabella represented, and Gavril despised. Kale, Gavril, their internal strife, it had all been a smokescreen, intentionally or unintentionally, for a much larger, more ancient threat poised to strike. This was their darkest moment. Captured traitors, yes, but now facing an imminent, unexpected attack by a shadowy force they knew little about. Specialists in stealth and mountain warfare, targeting not just Nightclaw territory, but threatening Silverwood as well. Nathan looked at Isabella, the crushing weight of command heavy on his shoulders, but his eyes also held a fierce, unwavering protectiveness. The fate of both their packs now rested entirely on their ability to face this unexpected, terrifying abyss together. The chilling howls of the approaching shadow walkers echoed relentlessly through the storm-laden air, a terrifying promise of imminent, brutal violence. Panic flickered visibly within the eyes of the loyal Nightclaw warriors gathered in the ruins, outnumbered and caught off guard, but Nathan's presence, solid and utterly resolute beside Isabella, held them steady, anchoring them against the rising tide of fear. There was no time for recrimination, no time for despair, only swift, decisive action. Elias! Nathan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack, sharp with alpha command. Secure the prisoners, Gavril, Kale, all of them. Get them back to the stronghold under heavy guard immediately. Use the secondary path. Avoid the falls. Lena, Alpha, Lena responded instantly, her face grim but fiercely determined, already anticipating his orders. Take half our remaining force, the fastest runners. Race back to the settlement now. Initiate full lockdown protocols. Defend the walls. Protect the non-combatants at all costs. Use the lower tunnels for defense if they breach the outer perimeter. Go! He knew sending Lena back dangerously weakened their current position at the ruins, but protecting the heart of the pack, the dens, the elders, the children, was paramount. And us. Alpha, one of Lena's most seasoned warriors asked, glancing apprehensively towards the growing cacophony of howls and the dark tree line from which the enemy would emerge. Nathan looked at Isabella. Her face was pale in the gloom, but her eyes were alight with fierce determination, her chin set stubbornly. The bond between them was a live wire, humming violently with shared fear, crushing responsibility, and a fierce, primal instinct to protect what was theirs, their packs, their people, each other. He drew strength from her quiet resolve. We hold the pass, Nathan declared, his gaze sweeping fiercely over the small group of remaining warriors, his alpha power settling over them like a tangible shield against the encroaching darkness. Isabella knows the legends, the potential weaknesses of these ancient paths. We funnel them here, at the tower ruins. This is the choke point. We delay them. We fight. We buy Lena and the stronghold time. He looked directly at Isabella then, his voice dropping slightly, but losing none of its intensity. Can you find a way to collapse that entrance? Seal it permanently. Trap them on the wrong side of this mountain. Isabella nodded immediately, her mind already racing, accessing the fragmented knowledge gleaned from the fragile scrolls in the archives. The mechanism Gavril revealed. It looked ancient, possibly unstable, interconnected with the tower's foundations. The scrolls mentioned fail-safe mechanisms, designed to seal the paths in dire emergencies. If I can trigger a structural collapse within the tunnel itself, near the entrance, then do it, Nathan ordered curtly, trust absolute in his eyes. Buy us the time we need. Rorik's remaining squad. He designated 2 loyal warriors who hadn't been part of the conspiracy. Guard the Luna while she works. The rest of you, with me, form a defensive perimeter. Use these cursed ruins for cover. They may know the hidden paths, but this is still Nightclaw territory. We make them bleed for every single step they take. Lena clasped Nathan's forearm briefly, a silent promise in her eyes. Hold them, Alpha. She turned to Isabella, her usual sternness softened by concern. Be safe. Luna. Then she was gone, a blur of motion, leading her warriors in a desperate race back towards the vulnerable main settlement. Nathan's remaining warriors, a small but highly skilled and fiercely loyal group, fanned out rapidly, taking positions among the crumbling stones and dark archways of the watchtower. Weapons ready, teeth bared, the air crackled, heavy with the ozone scent of the rapidly approaching storm and the sharp, metallic tang of impending bloodshed. Isabella, flanked by her two guards, rushed towards the exposed tunnel entrance where Gavril had been captured only moments before, dropping to her knees. Ignoring the damp earth and sharp stones, she examined the intricate stonework, the ancient locking mechanism. It was ingenious, complex, but clearly weathered by centuries of neglect and secrecy. She frantically tried to recall the fragmented descriptions from the scrolls, mentions of counterweights, release levers, specific pressure points designed to trigger fail-safe mechanisms, meant to seal the paths against discovery or invasion. Meanwhile, the first wave of attackers burst explosively from the tree line. They moved with an unnatural speed and silence that was deeply unsettling. They weren't like Nightclaw or Silverwood wolves moving in disciplined formation. They moved like wraiths, utilizing shadows and natural cover with uncanny expertise. Their fur darker than Nightclaw black, blending seamlessly with the stormy night. Shadow walkers, their movements were fluid, almost serpentine. They carried wickedly curved blades that glinted faintly, and their eyes glowed with a cold, unsettling luminescence in the darkness. "Engage," Nathan roared, the command unleashing the pent-up fury and adrenaline of his warriors. The battle for the pass began. Nightclaw warriors met the shadowy attackers head-on in a clash of fang claw and steel. The sounds of brutal combat, snarls, roars, the sickening crunch of bone, the clang of blades echoed eerily off the ancient ruins. Nathan himself was a force of nature, shifting instantly into his massive, dark-furred wolf form, a terrifying embodiment of alpha power. He tore through the enemy ranks like a dark storm, his presence alone bolstering his warriors, disrupting the attacker's eerie coordination with sheer, overwhelming ferocity. He fought with a terrifyingly controlled fury, always positioning himself to shield his fighters. His eyes constantly scanning the battlefield, assessing the flow of battle, his gaze flicking instinctively towards Isabella, even amidst the deadly chaos. The Shadow Walkers were undeniably skilled, deadly, and knew the terrain intimately, using the ruins to their advantage with frightening efficiency. They employed hit-and-run tactics, attempting to overwhelm the smaller Nightclaw force through speed, stealth, and sheer numbers. But Nathan's warriors held their ground, fighting with the legendary desperation of Nightclaw wolves defending their territory. Their alpha, their Luna, their very way of life. Every inch of ground was contested fiercely. Isabella worked frantically at the tunnel entrance, her fingers tracing ancient, worn patterns in the stone, searching desperately for the release mechanism described in the cryptic texts. Her two guards fought defensively, backs towards her, fending off shadow walkers who tried to slip past the main melee to reach the strategically vital tunnel. One guard went down with a strangled cry, clutching a bleeding wound in his side, overwhelmed by two attackers. "Luna, hurry!" the remaining guard urged, grunting with effort as he parried a vicious strike from a curved blade aimed at his throat. "There are too many." Isabella found it, a recessed stone, cleverly hidden beneath a loose-facing block, carved with the faint, interlocking spiral she recognized from Nathan's description of the markers. It resisted her initial frantic push. It needed more force, or perhaps a specific sequence, a specific intent. Sweat beaded on her forehead, stinging her eyes. The savage sounds of the battle raged around her, Nathan's furious roars, the snarls of the enemy, the cries of the wounded. She felt his presence through the bond, a torrent of his strength, his fury, his desperate fear for her. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, blocking out the chaos, focusing her entire being, channeling her own inner wolf, recalling the precise, archaic phrasing in the scroll. "Turn back the shadow, embrace the stone's heart, with the will of the mountain. It wasn't just physical force. It was intent, purpose. She placed her hand flat on the stone again, pushing not just physically, but with the combined will of her lineage, the Silverwood deep-rooted desire for peace and protection. Mingled with the hard-won Nightclaw resilience she had absorbed in this harsh land, she poured her intent into it. Close, seal, protect with a deep, groaning, grating sound that seemed to come from the very bowels of the mountain. The stone shifted inwards. A low, powerful rumbling began deep within the earth beneath her feet. Dust showered from the tunnel ceiling, quickly thickening. "It's working!" she yelled, scrambling back as the vibrations intensified. "Get clear!" Her remaining guard, seeing her success, shoved her further back with his free arm, then turned to face two more shadow walkers converging on them, meeting their charge with a final, defiant roar to buy her precious seconds. Isabella scrambled away just as the rumbling reached a crescendo, with a deafening roar that drowned out even the storm and the battle. A huge section of the tunnel roof and the overlying rock face collapsed inwards. Tons of rock, earth, and debris crashed down with unimaginable force, shaking the very foundations of the ancient watchtower. A massive plume of thick dust billowed out, completely obscuring and sealing the entrance. Irrevocably, the pathway was closed. The shadow walkers near the entrance recoiled, momentarily stunned by the violent collapse. Their coordinated attack faltering, it broke their momentum. Their primary objective literally turning to dust before their eyes. At that exact moment, Nathan, seeing the tunnel sealed and Isabella momentarily safe, let out a mighty, triumphant roar that cut through the enemy's shock, rallying his weary warriors for one final, desperate push. He ignored the lesser fighters, targeting the clear enemy leader, a large, heavily scarred wolf distinguishable by the air of command he projected and the slightly more ornate dark armor he wore. Their duel was swift, primal, and brutal. Alpha against alpha, predator against predator. Nathan. Fueled by righteous fury, the relief of Isabella's success, and the desperate need to end the threat, fought with unmatched ferocity, his powerful jaws snapping, his claws tearing. He drove the Shadow Walker leader back relentlessly, exploiting a momentary opening in the enemy's defense to land a devastating, decisive blow to the throat. The leader fell, lifeblood staining the rain-slicked stones. Seeing their leader defeated and their strategic objective, the tunnel access, completely destroyed, the remaining Shadow Walkers faltered definitively. Their eerie stealth and coordination broke completely. Facing the enraged Nightclaw Alpha, who now turned his terrifying attention fully upon them, and his remaining, bloodied but resolute warriors, their morale shattered. With chilling howls of frustration, rage, and loss, they disengaged abruptly, melting back into the darkness of the storm-lashed woods, retreating towards the now useless border crossing. An almost deafening silence fell upon the ruins, broken only by the ragged, panting breaths of the exhausted Nightclaw survivors. The low moans of the injured from both sides scattered among the stones, and the rising howl of the wind as the storm finally broke in earnest. Cold rain began to fall heavily, washing over the battlefield, mingling with the blood staining the ancient stones, cleansing and chilling in equal measure. Nathan shifted back slowly, his human form scratched, bruised, bleeding from several minor wounds, but radiating exhaustion and hard-won triumph. His eyes, fierce and wild, immediately sought Isabella through the rain and gloom. She ran to him, stumbling over debris, ignoring the mud and blood. Throwing her arms around his solid, reassuring form, he crushed her against him fiercely, burying his face in her rain-soaked hair. His overwhelming relief, a palpable wave washing over the mate bond, nearly buckling her knees. "You did it," he murmured against her hair, his voice thick with raw emotion, stripped bare of all his former defenses. "Isabella, you saved us. You saved both our packs." She clung to him tightly, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart against hers, anchoring her in the chaotic aftermath. "We did it, Nathan," she whispered back, her voice trembling slightly. "Together." He pulled back slightly, his large hands cupping her face gently, his icy blue eyes, usually so cold, now blazing with fierce, undeniable love, pride, and overwhelming admiration. The last vestiges of his hatred, his resentment, his bitterness, all of it had been burned away, cauterized in the crucible of shared battle and mortal danger. He saw only her, his strong, brave, intelligent, resilient Luna, his mate, his equal. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Together." He lowered his head and kissed her, right there amidst the ruins, the rain, and the aftermath of battle. It wasn't a gentle kiss, it was fierce, possessive, acclaiming, a sealing of everything they had overcome, everything they now were to each other. It was a promise forged in fire, witnessed by the storm and the spirits of the ancient stones. It was the climax, not just of the battle against their enemies, but of the war within themselves. It was the final, irrevocable fusion of their souls, bound together not by treaty, but by respect, courage, and a love that had conquered hate itself. The storm raged as the surviving Nightclaw warriors, weary but resolute, tended to their wounded comrades and secured the immediate area around the collapsed tunnel entrance at the ruined watchtower. Returning scouts confirmed the Shadow Walkers' full retreat. They had withdrawn completely across the border, their surprise attack decisively thwarted. Their ancient strategic objective denied by Isabella's quick thinking and courage. Word soon arrived via runners from the main settlement. Lena had successfully defended the stronghold against what turned out to be minor probing attacks, likely diversionary tactics coordinated with Gavril's plan, and the captured traitors. Gavril and Kale, along with their key followers, were securely imprisoned within the deepest cells beneath the Alpha's lodge, exhausted but undeniably victorious. Nathan led his battered warriors, Isabella walking steadfastly by his side, her hand now naturally held in his, back towards the heart of their territory. News of the battle, the Luna's bravery in sealing the ancient Shadow Walker path, the Alpha's decisive victory against the invaders, and the exposure of the internal betrayal spread rapidly through the Pack's communication network. As they entered the main settlement gates, they were met not with the wary silence and suspicion that had marked Isabella's arrival weeks ago, but with relieved cheers and cries of welcome. Pack members lined the pathways, their faces showing undisguised awe, gratitude, and deep respect for the Alpha and Luna who had fought side by side, risked everything, and ultimately saved them all. The Pack saw not a forced political pairing, but a true Alpha couple, united in strength and purpose. The following days were dedicated to healing, rebuilding trust, and delivering justice. The injured warriors were carefully tended to, in the healer's den by Isabella and Alara, their combined knowledge of traditional Nightclaw treatments and Silverwood herbal remedies proving remarkably effective, forging a stronger bond between the two experienced healers. Nathan, meanwhile, oversaw the reinforcement of defenses along the border near the now sealed pass and personally conducted the interrogations of the prisoners. Gavril remained defiant to the end, consumed by his ancient Stonefang hatreds and fanaticism. He revealed little more about the Shadow Walker enclave beyond confirming their continued existence. Their deep-seated desire for vengeance against both packs for perceived historical wrongs and treaty betrayals, and their likely anger at his failure. Kyle, stripped of his ambition, his followers, and facing the stark consequences of his treason, was utterly broken. He confessed his entire role, admitting how easily Gavril had manipulated his resentment and ambition with false promises of power and glory. He confirmed Gavril's use of the Shadow Walker markers to coordinate with the external force and admitted, shamefacedly, to orchestrating the accidents targeting Isabella, hoping to remove her as a symbol of the treaty and undermine Nathan's authority, thus paving his own path to leadership. His confession solidified Gavril's guilt beyond any doubt. With the immediate threats contained and the truth revealed, Nathan convened a full pack council in the Great Hall. He stood before them, tall and commanding. But this time, Isabella was seated directly beside him at the high table, not behind or separate, but as his acknowledged equal partner, her hand resting confidently on his arm. He recounted the events of the preceding weeks, the subtle signs of internal betrayal, the discovery of the Shadow Walker threat, the manipulation by Gavril, Kale's complicity, the desperate battle at the ruins. He spared no detail, laying bare the treachery that had threatened to tear their pack apart from within, while inviting destruction from without. He then spoke specifically of Isabella, his voice resonating with pride and newfound warmth that stunned many of the elders. Luna Isabella, he declared, his gaze sweeping the hall, was sent here by treaty, yes. But she proved her loyalty not through birthright or empty words, but through courageous action, sharp intelligence, and unwavering commitment to the well-being of this pack. He recounted her insight regarding the rogue attacks, her contribution during the Blizzard rescue, her bravery during the Blood Moon hunt, and ultimately, her crucial role in deciphering the enemy's plans and sealing the invasion path at immense personal risk. She faced danger with courage. She used her wisdom for the good of the Nightclaw pack. She fought beside you. She fought beside me. He lifted her hand, lacing their fingers together firmly. A public display of unity and affection that silenced the hall but was met with murmurs of deep approval. She is me, mate. She is our Luna, and she has earned her place among us, not by decree, but by fire and by heart. He then pronounced judgment on the traitors, Gavril, for his deep betrayal, his manipulation of pack members, and his consorting with ancient enemies, was sentenced to the harshest form of exile, stripped of his name and status, banished immediately to the desolate northern wastes beyond the pack territories, forbidden ever to return under penalty of death. Kale and his closest, most active conspirators, their betrayal driven more by youthful ambition and misguided resentment than deep-seated malice like Gavril's, received a different sentence. They were stripped of rank but not exiled, instead sentenced to a lengthy period of intense, supervised labor, tasked with rebuilding the damaged defenses and contributing tangibly, sweatily, to the pack they had sought to divide. It was a stern but just sentence, reaffirming Nathan's absolute authority while allowing for the possibility, however distant, of eventual reintegration for those who proved truly repentant through hard work and demonstrated loyalty. The Council, witnessing the genuine partnership and mutual respect between their Alpha and Luna, seeing the clear evidence of the threats they had overcome together, accepted his judgment without dissent. The pack, unified by the shared danger and inspired by their leader's example, began the slow, necessary process of healing the divisions that had festered for so long. Respect for Isabella solidified into genuine affection and admiration. Her quiet strength, empathy, and intelligence were now recognized and valued as essential complements to Nathan's fierce power. She started implementing small changes, improving communication with the healers, establishing better record-keeping in the archives, initiatives subtly supported by Nathan. In the quiet aftermath, days later, when the most urgent matters were settled, Nathan and Isabella finally found a rare moment of peace for themselves, standing together on the private balcony of the Alpha's lodge, looking out at the majestic, moonlit mountains that were now truly Siver's shared territory. Nathan turned to her, his usual stern expression softened by vulnerability. "Isabella," he began, his voice softer, rougher with emotion than she had ever heard it. "I owe you more than just an apology. For weeks, I was blinded by prejudice, by bitterness over a past I couldn't control, by grief I refused to process. I saw your gentleness, your Silverwood ways, and foolishly mistook it for weakness. I saw our forced bond as a cage, a burden, not," he struggled for the word, "not the anchor it has become. I was wrong. So profoundly wrong." He gently touched the faint scar remaining high on her cheekbone from a deflected blow during the final battle, his touch sending warmth through her. "You are the strongest person I know, not just in battle, though you were magnificent." A faint smile touched his lips. But here, he touched his own heart, then gently touched hers over the simple tunic she wore. "Your resilience, your loyalty despite my cruelty, your quiet courage, your sharp mind, they are the bedrock this pack needs. They are what I need." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, blurring the image of his intense face, but they were tears of relief, of catharsis, of overwhelming joy. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice thick, "I never wanted your hatred. I only came here hoping for peace for our people, finding not this. With you," she gestured between them, encompassing the undeniable bond, the deep affection, the hard-won partnership, "is more than I ever dared to hope for in my wildest dreams. My hatred is long gone," he murmured, pulling her close against his strong chest, wrapping his arms around her securely. "Burned away in the fight, purified by your strength. What's left?" He looked deep into her eyes, his own icy blue gaze now filled with an intensity that was pure, unwavering love and devotion. "What's left is this: you, me, our pack, our future." The mate bond pulsed between them, warm, strong, vibrant, and finally, joyfully accepted by both. "I love you, Isabella, my mate, my Luna, my partner, my everything. And I love you, Nathan," she whispered, rising on her toes to meet his kiss, a kiss that sealed their hard-won happiness, gentle yet passionate, full of promise. Their joint leadership transformed the Nightclaw pack. Nathan's fierce strength and decisive command, tempered now by Isabella's wisdom, strategic thinking, and deep empathy, created a powerful, effective balance that fostered loyalty, security, and a surprising degree of prosperity. They ruled not through fear, but through mutual respect, respect for each other, evident to all, and respect for their pack members, whose concerns Isabella ensured were heard. They maintained and actively strengthened the alliance with Silverwood, exchanging knowledge, resources, and even arranging joint training exercises, proving to both packs that true unity, forged in understanding and mutual benefit rather than bitterness and suspicion, was the ultimate path to enduring strength. The story of the harsh Nightclaw Alpha who hated his forced Silverwood mate, only to discover her true worth, her hidden fire, and fall deeply, irrevocably in love amidst betrayal, ancient conspiracies, and desperate battle, became a cherished legend within the Nightclaw Pack, a powerful testament to the fact that true strength often lies hidden beneath a quiet surface. That love can bloom unexpectedly even in the harshest conditions, and that even the most unlikely alliances, when built on earned respect, unwavering devotion, and shared courage, can forge an unbreakable bond and reshape the future. Theirs was a happily ever after, not given, but earned, forged in fire, and bound forever by a love that had heroically overcome hatred itself.